Welcome back to the Clarity Digital Pod. I'm your host, Sefati. Today, I'm joined by Andy Jolls, a seasoned chief marketing officer, AI consultant, and someone who helped shape my early career. We're talking about how AI is changing marketing leadership, how search engine optimization is evolving, and what it takes for marketing leaders to stay ahead in this new era. It's a conversation full of real insights, not just theory, so let's jump right into it. Hey Andy, how's it going?
It's going well. Good to see you, Al.
I know it's been a couple of decades, right? That
Yep.
that we connected. I'm glad that you find time. I know you're a busy person. I appreciate your time. And just to give you a little intro, you were the first CMO I ever worked for. And I was transitioning away from being that technical SEO guru into a more of a marketing SEO person, and you
Yep.
hired me, and I learned a lot from you. So that was a little bit of intro that I have for you. But if you don't mind introducing yourself for our audience, that would be wonderful.
Sure. Andy Jolls. I'm a 25 plus year marketer. Most of that is B2B, but Al and I actually worked together in a B2C context. We actually worked together at cooking.com, which eventually got rolled into Target. And that was a classic B2C e-commerce, like 40,000 SKUs, really figuring out from a marketing perspective. We really owned the revenue and figuring out like how do we drive acquisition and all that. But since then, I guess so I've sat in the CMO seat for 12 years. I've had, I think it's four exits and a couple failures in there too. We learn from our successes, we learn from our failures. And I've done everything from the qual side of marketing to the quant demand gen side. Obviously, we're very quant heavy on the B2C side. And then just in the last few years, I fell into a marketing role in the cloud space where I started doing some consulting. And then I was a CMO at a company called Mission that recently exited. And in that time, I started getting curious about machine learning and AI. And I was early from a marketing standpoint, I was early into the generative AI space. I joined a generative AI startup, and now I have my own consulting firm through Roxology, where I do go to market and AI implementation consulting.
That's wonderful, and I'm glad you brought up AI because I got my degree in computer science, and I took one course in Introduction to AI. I'm like, this stuff is too theoretical. It's never going to become a thing. And as being an SEO guy, I saw Google starting implementing more machine learning things. But I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, it's far away. And then ChatGPT comes out of nowhere, and then it just now just we have this explosion of Gen AI. And then we're getting to agentic AI, uh,
Yeah.
and I see that impacting all businesses, in particular marketing teams, a lot. So how do we marketers cope with that? What do we have to do? Keep learning. Obviously, that's one of them, right?
Yeah. I think that's the first thing is really just to keep learning. I think, look, obviously the big headline that leads to a lot of discussion and a lot of debate is that AI is going to take away jobs. And I think one thing that we know for sure is AI is certainly going to take away the jobs of people who don't use AI.
Yeah.
If you just stay in the dark, then you're going to be going from in the dark to left out in the cold. So you have to figure out how to start embracing these tools and technologies and really just at the beginning, just playing and figuring out like, and it's part of what I'll teach teams is just start by putting it on your phone and using the mobile app and having conversations with it. There are a lot of things that you can do just using it in your daily life, in your personal life. You and I are both parents. I
Mhm.
use it to help tutor my kids. And so people will look at that and say, what, that doesn't have anything to do with business, but it does because you're honing your skill, you're building your comfort level around it, and it's a good way to actually get started. So a lot of times I think the biggest themes that and discussions I'm having with teams right now, one is get moving, right? If you're not moving, you need to get moving. The other one that's come up more recently is there are a lot of teams that are reaching out and saying, hey, we want to talk about agentic. And what I come to realize is you need to crawl before you run. Like you are like you are getting really excited about the headlines around being able to do agentic things, and you are not ready. Plus, for the fact, and I'm happy to talk about this, it's like there's a lot of things that are being positioned as agentic, just as there were a lot of things that were being positioned as AI that really, in the case of agentic, they're really not agentic. They're just automation. And so when you look at it, it's okay, this isn't really using AI to do this. It's just it's not using agentic. It's not using reasoning and thinking. I'm happy to dive into any and all of this. Like, where would you like to start?
I think from a marketing leadership perspective, I would love to know how would you lead an AI culture organization?
Yeah.
Because and where should you use AI, where you should not use AI? I think that would be a good place to start.
Yeah, so I think a framework that I've built recently is really starting around your OKRs, right?
Mhm.
So if you're a team that uses objectives and key results and you're using that to manage on a quarterly basis, then really I have an exercise where I just take teams' OKRs and I basically run that through AI and say, hey AI, like where can you help me with these OKRs? And the LLMs are getting good enough now, whether we talk about flavors, but whether it's OpenAI and ChatGPT or Gemini or Microsoft, they're all getting pretty good at taking a task like that and coming back and saying, actually, I've read through all these OKRs. I actually think I'm the best suited to tackle them in this order. Here's where I can actually help you first. So you don't even as a human have to figure out like where do I start? You can actually use these tools to help you figure out where you should start. And I'll pull this up while we're talking just to read off an example here. But you can go and see if you've got an OKR that's around, okay, I want to make sure I'm touching all of my key accounts with more frequency, then the LLM might tell you like, yeah, this is a really good one to tackle, and then it'll help you actually develop a plan to do that. So I think starting with the things you have, and I'll say this versus another method that I see a lot of teams do is they'll basically add an OKR for AI and say,
Mhm.
oh, we're gonna add an OKR. I don't like that as much because I feel like you're just going to push that to the bottom of your OKRs and you're going to work on everything else.
Yeah.
So for example, like I had an LLM develop a bunch of OKRs. I gave it a persona. I said, this is a marketing team. And it came back and it said, okay, your first objective is enhance target account identification penetration. Your
Mhm.
second one is improve account level conversion and pipeline generation. Your third one is optimize account-based content and campaign performance.
Wow.
And then within that, it basically said, okay, like the key result is develop and deploy personalized content for top 20 target accounts with 90% account coverage. And so it basically, and then I asked it, I'm like, okay, tell me the rank of all these, and it told me the rank for each of the key results that it put forth as an idea. And then I said, okay, great, let's build out a plan for this. And it'll actually start to build out a plan. So part of it is I think one of the things also that happened in since ChatGPT really came on the scene in November of 2022 is like our first use case was like, let's have it write something for me. And that's a really obvious and a strong win because clearly the first villain in this story is the blank page and the blinking cursor. Like we as marketers are often faced with creating something from nothing. And so it helped us solve that. Oh, help me write a press release on,
Yeah.
and I remember that was one of the first use cases I did was I had it write I didn't have it write a press release, I remember this, I had it write headlines, like, I was struggling for headlines and bylines, and I said,
Yeah.
"Okay, here's the press release, can you write these?" And I remember sitting there with my product marketer and going, "Wow, like, this in 2 minutes literally did what it would have taken us a couple of hours to do, and probably ended up with some better options."
Yeah.
So we started there, and I feel like a lot of marketing teams are pretty adept at like the writing piece of this. But where they haven't gone to that next phase, which is thinking about these as like thought leaders and thought partners and saying, okay, like I'm going to have a conversation with this and it's going to be my partner to tackle a particularly hard problem. If I have to develop a personalized content program for 20 target accounts, I don't just need tactics. I actually need some strategy. I
Mm.
need somebody to work with and bounce some ideas off. And so it can really present that. So I think for a lot of teams, and certainly at the leadership level, I'm really telling a lot of CMOs like you have to start using this. This is going to be very difficult for you to just tell your team to go use AI and have the expectation that you can get a free pass and
Yeah.
that you can't do it. I think that's always been sort of part of my management fabric really is okay, like I want to make sure I'm dog fooding or champagne drinking along with the with
Mhm.
the team.
Yeah.
And so to a lot of CMOs, I tell them like, look, you've got to figure out a way to carve out time where you're experimenting and tinkering as well.
Yeah, I like that. Just lead by example. And I think a key thing you just brought up was just have a conversation with it. It's not just like a one-line prompt, right? Just, hey, ChatGPT or Gemini, whatever, you are now a CMO.
That's right.
Or right. What do you
So
think
I
about this? Yeah,
so
go ahead.
so part of what I do with that is so Al, do you have any pets? Do you have a dog or cat? Do
We
you
had
have
a dog
any?
that died, but yeah, we're
Okay.
thinking about getting another one.
So one of the things that I did is, and I tell teams to do this because I run into a lot of folks who seem to have dogs, and we have two dogs, and I
Mhm.
do a lot of dog walks. And so I basically just installed ChatGPT into the lower part of my phone. And
Okay.
so I was like, I'm going to make this, not only is it going to be, I'm downloading the mobile app, but I'm giving it a top tier presence so that I can actually just pull out my phone, open it up, and start having a conversation with it. And I remember one of the first times I did this, I went on like a 20-minute walk and I had a conversation with ChatGPT. And I came back and it was like 14 pages of dialogue essentially between the two of us. And but a lot of people hear that and go, "Oh God, like that sounds like work, like 14 pages." But no, but you can come back and then say, "Hey, summarize this," or "Hey, can you pull out what our key conclusions are, key next steps are?" To do this, it really does become transformational. So I think there's a couple of things with teams where I'm like, look, I think if you move from like the keyboard
Mhm.
to voice, then you'll be able to get a little bit of a thought partner. And I'll give you one more to play around with that I feel like a lot of people haven't played around with. So Google has something called AI Studio, which it's not very highly marketed by them. So it's aistudio.google.com. Most people probably know Google for Gemini. They market that more consistently. But AI Studio has a couple of neat features in it, and it's attached to more of their labs and dev center. So you being a computer sci guy, like you probably be like, okay, this is where I should be. And so they have a cool thing. Have you played around with it? Have you played around with AI
I,
Studio?
I've been getting the emails and it's on my to-do list. So to answer is no,
Okay.
but it's been back in my mind. Yeah.
So one of the things that they have in there is you can actually just stream, like you can stream what you're doing on your desktop. And then when you're stuck, you can just ask a question and it's just
Oh.
watching you work. And then you'll just ask and say, "Hey, I'm stuck here." So I'll give you an example. I could be working on a workflow automation and it's a little bit of a puzzle trying to figure out like how do I get this to work. And I was in make.com, and whether you play around with Make or Zapier or any of the other workflow programs, if you get stuck, you can just say, "Hey, I'm stuck here. Can you help me? Can you help me think about what, either what the error is, what the mistake is?" And it will just read and walk you through it. Also becomes a really good teaching tool because it's not just essentially like I could pull up a school math problem and instead of it just answering the question, I could say, "I'm stuck here," without giving me the answer, help me think about what steps I should be taking. Give me hints. So there's a lot of cool things that I find like teams end up adopting more and become more users if they can go more multimodal. If they can actually play around with voice, then that'll do that. I'll bring up one more thing that I think is the other success factor I see on teams, which is The teams where the leaders basically say, "Hey, I'm gonna spend a little money here." And I say a little money because it's really not that much money to get your team onto a team or an enterprise license. Enterprise license is a little trickier because for a lot of these, I think for ChatGPT, I think you need 50 seats. That's a little different. I get it. More expensive.
Mm.
But to get everybody on your team using a $20 a month license,
Yeah.
what I notice is if they just do that, those teams are climbing ahead because they're kind of going in on it together versus the leader who says, "Oh, if you want to get it, like you can, I'll reimburse it." And
Yeah.
then it just becomes like two people on the team tinker, and the rest of the people are just like, "I'm too busy. I'm not going to do this." But if you go at it as the team approach, I'm definitely seeing the teams that are the furthest ahead are definitely the teams that have enterprise licenses. They're doing more.
Yeah.
The teams that have more kind of complete pro licenses across the team, not as much as the enterprise teams, but they're doing more than the teams where it's one or two people or where it's BYO AI, bring your
Yeah.
own AI.
Mhm.
Those teams, like, they could be doing some, but not as much.
Yeah, a really good tip. So basically, two things that I took away from this that I think I should be doing from myself and my team is number one, get a license for everybody as opposed to leave it up to them to get their own, and maybe we can pay them back. And the second is like when I go for my walks, and I do go for a lot of walks. I do have the app on my phone, but I don't have it where you had it. So basically, that way I can speak to it as opposed to because texting is actually takes longer too. And that's a really good tip because a lot of times I have these ideas that they're just there in a moment, and I could actually record those and refine those using ChatGPT, and I hadn't done that before, so I'm gonna do that for myself for sure.
Yeah, it'll be, I think, report back, but most people who end up doing it, it ends up being game changing. And I've heard the counter argument. Some people are like, look, like dog walking is like the one time where I get a break, and I say that's great. I'm not telling you to not recharge. I'm telling you, like, if you're already on that dog walk and you're like listening to podcasts or you're doing something else, try this as like something that's a little bit more interactive. I think you're right. We often come up with ideas while we're out walking the dog or driving in our car. And if we have a long commute, then it's a chance to turn that into more of a conversation.
Very cool. Do you see? Let me ask you a question, and this could be a controversial one. The role of CMO is has always been the shortest tenure role in the C suite, and sometimes a lot of CMOs get moved on and become CROs and CEOs, and that's
Yeah.
why. And a lot of times they fall off, or in your case, a company goes public or whatnot. Do you think this role is going to continue being this way, or do you think this is an opportunity for CMOs to really lead the AI and digital transformation?
I do think this represents a big opportunity. So I think you're right. I think, look, and I don't know what the statistics show, but it feels like there are fewer and fewer CMO roles. Like it feels like in within different stages of startups, they're trying to lean towards, maybe I'm just going to get a CRO and I'm
Mhm.
going to get like a lower level marketing person to tackle this problem. So it feels a little bit more of that. I certainly don't see that many CMOs moving into the CRO role. And I think there's a lot of debate and discussion around why is that. It doesn't feel like enough CMOs try to move into the CEO role. And I think that's been true for a long time. I think the thing that I've believed for a long time, and I don't think AI changes this, is you got to get comfortable with math.
Yeah,
That's the first thing, which is like we're living in an increasingly quantitative world, and you have to get comfortable with data and really just math at its core of really understanding, okay, I can really understand how the business operates financially. And to this day, I'm still surprised by some of the metrics that I hear that marketers throw out and how they're
yeah.
calculating things. And so I'm always like, oh, you realize that's not how they're doing it at the executive level because you're not putting in all the costs. I think CAC is an example of this. I've seen people do the calculation, and it's like, you're not really missing. If you and I own this business, we would be putting in all the costs because otherwise we would be bleeding money. Like we wouldn't be making money. Like that's an example I'll often use to train teams where around search engine marketing. I'm like, okay, so
Yeah.
let's say like Al, you and I actually own this business, and like we are not going to pay $5 for a keyword if
Mhm.
we can only make $5 like immediately off that because overhead and what we have to pay each other, it's not going to
Mhm.
work, right? So
Yeah.
we have to figure out an arbitrage model that actually works. And so I think that's I think is really number one of getting comfortable with math. The second one is around AI. I think this is an opportunity just as e-commerce, I think, gave some power to marketers because now it's okay, now we're just going to do direct sales.
Yeah.
I think as AI continues to improve, more of that shift moves more down into direct sales, and you're going to get more and more comfort from users buying without actually interacting with people. So as that happens, I think that falls on the marketers to make sure that's all working correctly. And we'll see if
Yeah.
that evolves that the right way. I think the RevOps role is to me an interesting. Like somebody asked me the question last week, like, where do I think who's the best suited to be CRO? And I said, I think RevOps has an interesting case
Mm.
here because they really understand the map and the mechanics of how it's all flowing and how it's all working. And so if they can get that figured out and working, and if they can figure out enough of the sales and the marketing pieces, they could be in an interesting position. But for the marketing leaders out there, I'm like, look, you've got to become a little bit more of a generalist in that you've got to be good at the creative side,
Yeah.
but you've got to be good at the quantitative side. There's a lot of arguments for AI being that if AI ends up doing all the coding, right, and it can handle actually all the technical and all the tactical, then really what's left is the creative side. And
Yeah.
I know there's a lot saying AI can do the creative, but I still think a lot. I'm still thinking again, like the expert creator using AI is going to outpunch like either the expert creator not using AI or the like mediocre creator using AI. I just think that's going to be the best mix. Like I always living in Los Angeles, I frame this as Hans Zimmer using AI is
Yeah.
going to like outpunch like
Sure.
the mediocre composer using AI or a really good composer who just decides not to embrace it. And so I think that's what we're going to see.
Very cool. That's a really good points. Also, I've seen an emergence, and it's been around for a long time. But like people like you have a lot of experience, work with various companies under a fractional CMO consultant, whatever you want to call it. And I've seen a lot
Yeah.
of that happening. A lot of startups, even the more established companies, are going that route. I've noticed because that not only financially makes sense, but also just you want someone who's up to speed with everything. You might need a couple of fractional people to do that, right? And I have a comment about quantifying things. I still remember, and I want to tell you a story when I came to you, and I never forgot this. I'm like, Andy, I have Moz at the time. It was called SEO Moz. I don't like this
Yeah.
tool. You want better reports from me, so let's buy this other tool. And that tool was like an enterprise level SEO tool. I forget which one it was. It was like $2,000 a month. And you told me, Al, do you want to give you $2,000 a month to create content, or you want to buy a tool? And I was just like, that really changed the way I thought about things. I'm like, okay, because at the end of the day, you and I had to provide revenue. We had
Right.
to make sure that we had more SEO traffic, and so I'm glad you brought up the metrics, having metrics that do matter to a business. Cool. I think you want to talk about SEO too a little bit in the age of AI, and that's my thing. And I recently spoke about it actually at the Camp Amiva, and
Okay.
another place called another convention. It was more of a roundtable e-commerce summit in Boston a couple of weeks ago, and it's changing everything. As an SEO person who used to be in Google all the time, I haven't used Google for anything research recently. Like I think I use Google right now to look for maps and things like that, and occasionally news because I don't know how recent ChatGPT news is. But and then e-commerce, obviously, even if for e-commerce, a lot of times I go straight to Amazon And if Amazon doesn't have it, then I go to Google.
Yeah.
And recently I learned that Perplexity e-commerce actually is pretty good too. You actually want a product, it lists it to you, and it does a better job than Google. Actually, traditional Google maybe it gives you a table. Hey, this product is depending on your prompt. So, from your perspective, do you think this is going to be more of a widely adopted user behavior? Because obviously, you and I are in this field, so we might be using AI more than everybody else. But I sense that
Right.
maybe a leapfrog here, where all of a sudden users and common users start using AI more. And I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to let you speak. Is that my wife? She's a school nurse. She always struggled about creating reports, and I'm like, hey, download ChatGPT, put your report in ChatGPT, and then it will tell her to do it in a tone you want. And now she loves it. She even paid the paid version of it. Going back, so she became a common user of ChatGPT. Do you think SEO, traditional SEO, is going to go away and the AI search is going to become a new thing? Whatever they call it, AIO, GEO, whatever the name is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I think that's part of where we're at is we're trying to decide what the name of it is. I remember being at an event a couple of weeks ago and somebody was talking about selling their Google stock. And I said, I wouldn't do that just yet. I think Google's making a ton of investment in this. They're trying to figure out how do they do this. And they posted results, I think, today, and they're again like they're growth continues to move up. They continue to beat targets. So I think that there's still growth there. I do think that we're in a sphere of people who are now using AI to the point where we are using Google a lot less for search. I am using a lot of other Google products like Gemini and AI Studio and Google Cloud and whatnot. So I'm using a number of other tools. I think the other thing that's interesting is because of how nascent this is, and I'll give you an example. So somebody posted a tool, and I'll mention it. It was peck.ai, PEEC.ai, and and the way they described this tool was like, oh, this is a tool that's going to help you rank like for LLMs. And I had raised an eyebrow because I was like, I don't think that's what this is doing. I
Yeah.
think what this is doing is it's simply monitoring what is happening. And so they're like, so that's the first wave of this is you've got these tools that are coming up that are monitoring tools. And I will tell you, not Peck, but there's another one that I know their methodology is what they did was they spent $100,000 is my guess, running it through the OpenAI API, doing a numerous searches around categories for the biggest brands, and they've created a repository of how often those brands come up in those
Yeah.
results. So that's the basis for their moderate monitoring methodology. And so
Yeah.
their tool works great if you're a big brand. If you're
Yeah.
Coca-Cola, you're Apple, whatever, like you can actually go to them and they'll be able to tell you and give you some within some statistical significance how often you're coming up for keyword searches. But it only really works for brands and it's only a monitoring tool.
Yeah.
I have seen a number of agencies claim that they can actually help you get ranked for this, but I myself have not seen an agency like show me yet like how they're actually doing this.
Yeah.
And for all the tips, so here's a tip that I read months ago was take your content and just put like an executive summary at the top of your content because the theory was like that's how these are bots and they're going to appreciate that and they're going to push you up in the results because you're making them work you're making them work less, right? That hitting your page and instead of having to read 3,000 words, they're getting a summary or an abstract. And so I know companies who've basically taken that approach. I do not know whether that actually leads to results. Logically, it makes sense to me,
Yeah.
but I have no idea. So that's where I said I'm curious to see what you've learned. I think
Yeah.
that's what my I guess all of that is a short answer of saying we're pretty early.
Yeah.
It all feels really early, and I don't think like SEO is going to go away. I think it's going to morph, and
Mm.
I think we're going to figure out like how do we actually do this for the LLMs. What do you think?
Everything you said sounded pretty reasonable. The couple of things I've noticed is that LLMs still search Google as an authority. So if you rank in Google, you're more
Right,
likely to rank in LLMs, and
right.
that's been the case for us. Another thing is your bylines on other websites are, in my experience, has been very helpful. I write for Forbes Business Council and a couple other
Mm,
websites, and I have a byline there as an enterprise SEO consultant. And the other day I was testing in Perplexity. I'm like, give me the top enterprise SEO consultants in California. I was not in them. But then I'm like, top enterprise SEO consultants in Orange County, and then I was in them. I'm like, oh, cool. I was excited to see
yeah,
myself. It's because I was self-promoting elsewhere, and like you said, they got lazy and they, hey, if I'm enterprise SEO on Forbes and Fast Company, and also on my website, I said I'm an enterprise SEO consultant, then this guy must be an enterprise SEO consultant. And since he lives in Orange County and his business is in Orange County, so he's gonna show up there. Like you said, it's still pretty early. There's two things I want to say when it comes to AI search is that I think we gotta change our understanding of KPIs. In the past, it was ranking and traffic, and now I think it's about influence because they don't drive traffic back to your website. It's harder for you to track that. A lot
it's
of times,
brand. Yeah,
yeah, and they just say who it is. If sometimes they give you links, sometimes they don't. You never know, and even the links are not very like prominent. So I think we got to figure out how that helps us it's not very linear anymore, but okay, they click on my ranking, they go on my website, they converted. We got to figure out other ways to measure success, increasing direct traffic. I don't know, like what, I don't know what that is yet. And the second thing is that I think content is not just like content with keywords, but content actually matters for
yeah,
consumers, is more important than before, because in the past Google used to didn't understand your content, but looked at the keywords and tags and stuff like that, and the backlinks to your content. Now these LLMs actually understand your content, so they have to
right.
actually have to judge, is your content really useful to the user or not. So it's not just a matter of keywords and stuff. So those are the two things that I believe we have as an SEO and marketers. We got to think like content. Yeah, we can use AI to write content, but the data that comes out of the content needs to be original. We can't just spin somebody else's content, because that was it. That was an SEO tactic before. I would see something somewhere else, and I would spin it, and I would just put more keywords more than they did, and
Yeah.
build more backlinks, and it will rank. And now I don't think it's going to be like that anymore. There's an originality that's going to be more important, and then also, does your content really resonate with your consumers? Google will look at things like bounce rate and exit rate, but no, these LLMs really actually understand your content, because that's what they were trained to do. Large language models, right? So I think
Which does seem to align with what Google has been saying all along,
all
because
along,
they've
yeah,
said, "Hey, just create great content and this
yeah,
will work." And
yes,
I think this aligns. It's okay, you got to create great content. And so
yeah,
it does it does, I think, as you said, you're not going to be able to be lazy. You're going to have to figure out, okay, anybody can basically spin your competitor's article. So you've got to figure out like how do you actually do something that's going to be a little bit different and
yeah,
higher value.
sure,
And I think again, that's going to come that's one that's a win for the marketers in this mix, because the marketers are like, that requires creativity.
mm,
I'm going to have to
yes.
actually sit back and try to figure out like what can I do that's a little bit different.
Yeah, and we all sit on some sort of unique data that's unique to us that we can just amplify through content. I know we're running out of time. If you have a couple minutes, I'd like to ask you a couple of personal questions, if you don't mind.
Yeah, let's fire away.
When Andy is not marketing, what is he doing? Walking the dogs, being family man?
When I'm not marketing, I'm actually like I'll give the business answer first, which is I'm constantly learning about AI, right?
Yeah,
So I'm constantly researching, and in fact, I'm one of those people who kind of trades like streaming time and social media time for just spending time on YouTube watching AI experts talk about like the latest innovation of the week. So I'm constantly trying to play around. Like the whole vibe coding thing is really interesting
yeah,
right now, and playing around with like tools like Lovable or Firebase.
mm,
Like that's the kind of thing that I'm doing on that side. But on the personal side, I'm part of being fractional is I want the balance to be really involved with my kids and my family.
Yeah.
So I'm spending a lot of time shuttling kids to schools and to practices and doing all that stuff and just wanting to be a little bit more involved in a way that I felt like my parents couldn't always be there for me. And then like I work out, I play a little pickleball, we just got back from a trip from Korea. We love to travel as a family. So those are some of the hobbies.
Yeah, Korea is definitely one place I want to go. I love Korean barbecue. I miss K-Town. When I lived in LA, that was my place to go.
Yeah.
Cool. And I guess I think this is actually a business question. If you want to give us a 1 minute summary of your agency, Sology, and what is it you specifically do? I think you mentioned some of that, and how people can find you. And what can they expect from your services?
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn. You can also find me at aj@roxology.com. I'll throw this out there. You can schedule time with me at scheduleaj.com. But my services, they really can vary quite a bit in terms of whether it's you need a true just like implementation training session to just like the go to market applications of okay, do you need help actually getting your story together or figuring out like the your positioning to all the way of creating a fully implemented go to market plan. I tend to work with more startups, but again it just really depends on what the problem area is. My role when I was a CMO was I was always like the kind of the next scale hire, which is like the previous person had done a great job growing the business to the stage that it was in. And then I was the person to bring it to the next stage. And I try to bring that same thing into my consulting work. Because usually the company's actually got product market fit. They're usually like now ready for the next growth stage and they want to add like a level of maturity of, okay, now we're going to put in frameworks. We're going to do things like OKRs. We're going to put in some systems to get things more more moving. And a lot of it again is just now we're using more and more modern go to market tools to help us accelerate more quickly. ABM for example is that has completely changed with AI. It
Yeah.
used to be that like doing one-to-one marketing was very like high touch high lift, and now we're able to use technology to do that much more effectively through tools and technology.
Wonderful. I really appreciate it, Andy. I know we both have to go. It's been a pleasure. We
Yeah.
have to have you on again in future. Maybe speak a little more in specifics, like for example ABM, because we deal with that too, and things are changing really fast. Again, thank you so much, Andy. It was good to connect with you again, and I hope we can talk again soon.
I look forward to it, Al. Always. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.